Everybody, good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're in. It's great to be here. And I am speaking from the only capital city in the whole world that has the highest number of migratory birds passing through at any time in the year. Okay, so I do not have a presentation, which is what I normally always do. And there's a reason why. I think that some of us or some of you also have an exhaustion with always seeing a whole lot of presentations ever since COVID came in last year and has become the new reality. But nonetheless, I'm going to speak about emerging technologies and almost, more or less our state of play of where we're at on the continent of Africa, which again is a really bit of an overstretching statement because Africa is such a huge, huge geographical region. So some of the things may be specific to some certain geographies, but of course will not be specific to other geographies across this continent. So just for those who are not on the panel and who may be people who have joined, I will just try to define what emerging technologies are within the context of the Digital Transformation Summit, because emerging technologies also go beyond what we are dealing with here. So with respect to what we're dealing with here, emerging technologies are really development of practical applications, which are both and largely realized, and they're figuratively emerging into prominence from the background, where they've been non-existent or they've been obscure, and they're perceived as being capable of changing our current status quo. As a continent, we've got to be realistic to the fact that we are 1.2 billion people, of which about half of us, about 600 million or more, don't have access to power. And if you don't have access to power, then by default, then you also probably don't have access to internet. So the whole idea about emerging technologies, especially in the digital sphere, becomes quite a challenge, but at the same time, the very same challenges present great opportunities for us in more ways than one. So Adele, thank you very much for your presentation, and coming back and just reflecting from some of the things that Adele said, and also reflecting back on some of the things that also Denise, I hope I'm pronouncing that rightly, had also said in the earlier presentations. I want to also just put it this way. It is quite evident now that our past is certainly not a great predictor of our future, and neither is a present a good predictor either. And let me just hone into this point, because why is it so important for us to understand this? So in as much as we may be able to be building platforms, or we're able to building different products and different technologies, we must realize that so much has changed. And I'll just go back to a few days back, actually last week, and what happened in the US and specifically in the state of Texas, where all of a sudden, because of climate change, they were totally and absolutely disrupted in ways in which they would have never have fathomed or imagined. And that is because the technologies that they had used previously had never built in the resilience that as a matter of climate change. But as a continent, we must also be cognizant of the fact that we are actually inundated with a lot of wicked problems, especially poverty, especially climate change, and even in the midst of the global epidemic. But interestingly enough, we have found a lot of resilience across our people alongside innovations that can help us respond more effectively to some of these challenges that are there. So when we're speaking about at this Digital Transformation Summit, I want us to bring into the conversation what I fondly refer to as Africa's forgotten bottom millions. And this is actually more the actual makeup of who we are on this continent as opposed to the exception. So for all of us who have actually come into this conversation, if you are an African, no matter where you are listening from, you will relate with me when I tell you that you either have a sibling, if not a sibling, a first cousin, or your parents who live in a rural society. And therefore, it is interesting that a lot of the times when we speak about emerging technologies, a lot of the times when we speak about digital transformation, for us, we tend to look at it from a different standpoint than a lot of the vendors who are operating within our spaces or who are coming in and with solutions to our challenges and our problems. So I think that it's important that as we talk about emerging technologies, as we speak about digital transformation, we need to also understand that a lot of these things have to be driven from bottom up. They need to be demand driven and not vendor pushed on to us. So yes, there is an emerging consensus that while digital technologies are enabling and are important in social transformation, there also needs to be an understanding that a lot of us have still not gotten over and are still transiting through the second and the third industrial revolutions, because a lot of the things that we are discussing here today are actually hinged on the fourth industrial revolution. I will not go into discussing what the fourth industrial revolution is, a lot of terminologies, because these are things which you are actually able to Google and basically read and find about. I want to talk about what is we're facing every day and what is alienating us or what is stopping us from ensuring that in this race at this time, where everybody is at par when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution, when it comes to these new technologies, how is it that we as Africans, and especially the people that are referred to as Africa's forgotten bottom millions, who make up the majority of our population in a continent that has the largest number of young people worldwide under 18, do not end up becoming consumers of the technology that's already out there, but actually end up becoming also the innovators and also the people who are earning from those innovations and from those products and from those so-called services. So, well, different countries are at different stages. Kenya, I'll speak being here, we've actually gone a step forward. We actually have a data commissioner who actually will now be looking into issues of data and ensuring that data is protected. And hopefully, I'm looking at a situation whereby we can actually get people's data also being a source of income for them. Actually, I was very excited because before I came on this morning, I was reading an article, and I think you all need to check this out sometime. So we all know Uber. Just I think about a week ago, Uber, there was a ruling against Uber gig workers in London that they must now be employees. And I think going forward, and this is not just being specific to Uber, there needs to be a change in how it is that our gig, or what we're calling our gig economy across Africa, also has an aspect of socio-economic protection for those getting within the gig economy. So it's interesting that somebody's actually come up with another platform called Uber Cheats. I was reading about it just a few minutes before I came onto this, and you can check that out. And essentially, Uber Cheats counter checks what Uber delivery is paying to its gig workers who do the delivery. And it has found that there's been a disparage in that. So my whole idea of being on this forum here today was to say that as a continent, these are some of the 5 things that as governments and as also people in the policy space need to address for us to become an effective player and engager within the space of emerging technologies going forward. So one is, of course, is the issue of data, which I've just mentioned. But how data is collected, how it's correlated, who owns it, where it sits, and how it is used. Number two is energy. Without energy, which is part of the basic infrastructure, there's nothing that you can do. So energy is such an important thing. So we cannot be speaking about data or emerging tech without proper and reliable power. So not just having energy, but ensuring that the energy is also reliable and it is there when you need it. Then of course, the internet connectivity. Sadly enough, last year, now children are going back to school across the continent. If I remember clearly, at the peak when then, before the US and other countries around the developed world sent people home and people were at home doing homeschooling, in Africa, less than 16% of the total school-going children have or had access to internet. So again, you got to talk about the availability of internet, and then capacity. We've got to build the right skills, the right skill sets, so that we're actually able to ensure that, like I said before, we're actually in the driver's seat and not being the ones the products are being pushed to, but we're the ones also developing products for us. And especially, like I've said before, knowing and taking into account that this is the largest growing market and largest growing economic region going forward. And then, of course, and finally, agile governance, very important. We've got to look at ourselves in terms of corruption and in terms of other things. So how is it and what do we do so that we're able to play or to ensure that these are taken care of? Right now, most of governments are really blindsided by all the various vendors who fly into the capitals and are making various presentations to various government procurement agencies. So one of the things that I'm actually working on with other colleagues and within different forums is coming up with a set of different playbooks. So one is called a policymaker playbook. That is basically a playbook that demystifies and explains to policymakers exactly what emerging technologies are, and being able to ask the right questions and being able to be in a good position to ensure that as policymakers, the decisions that they are making are actually for the benefit of the people and the governments that they make policy for. The other is called the Citizens Playbook. Also, the citizens need to be aware and need to be informed about what it is that emerging technologies are all about. So how does it affect their lives? And why is it important that they need to understand exactly what is at play? So that's another playbook that we're also working on. But there's other playbooks that are also in place that we are working into, so that as a people and as a continent, we can finally take our rightful place and ensure that we will be Africa leading within the area of the fourth industrial revolution and emerging technologies. So just to quickly wrap up, because I want to keep on my time. So one of the things that as a continent, we need to ensure going forward is that we must not be here to reset systems. Instead, we must be here to refresh them, and to refresh them for us. And then again, we're actually not interested in updating ideas. We're here to upgrade those ideas. And finally, we're not here to recycle products, but we're here to repurpose them. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me this privilege to be able to give you some thoughts on where and how it is that as Africa, we need to engage within the sphere of emerging technologies going forward. And I look forward to engaging with a whole lot of you later on. I'm happy that I can see other people who have actually joined us online, colleagues that I also work with in other spheres. I can see Ronald Osumba is here, and it's great to know that I'm amongst a whole lot of great minds who are here. Thank you.